This is Talkin' Mule Deer with your hosts Steve Belinda and Jody Stemler. Talkin' Mule Deer takes you on a journey to learn more about the Mule Deer Foundation, mule deer and black-tailed deer biology and management, tips and tactics for hunting, conservation issues, and even features some of our corporate and celebrity partners. Now, let's start talking mule deer.
Hey, it's Jody Stemler.
And I'm Steve Belinda, and you're talking mule deer. So today we have repeat guests.
But it's important repeat guests because we're talking to, Miles Moretti. So maybe he's not important, but we've got Jeff Crane with the Congressional Sportsmans Foundation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here.
Great to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, we appreciate you taking time. And you're repeat because you guys, we sat down with you last year to talk about successes congressionally, legislatively, and in state caucuses around the country. We also were talking about what was coming up and you were seeing on the horizon. And some of those things have happened now. So tell us a little. We have accomplished things that we talked about on our podcast last year.
That's true.
So I'm not sure all of the people who listen know what great successes we've had. So give us a little bit of a rundown on some of the things that we achieved in 2019.
So we back it up, look at it from a year ago, and we think about, okay, the Democrats had just taken over the House, midterm elections, went from Republican House, Senate, and White House to Republican Senate. They retained the Senate, and a Democrat controlled the House. So everyone's initial reaction was, well, divided Congress, stalemate, we're not going to get anything done. Nothing could have been further from the truth. Probably S-47, the Dingell Act, passed in March of last year, maybe in the last 10 years, the biggest lands package for public access that has been passed probably maybe this century, actually. And so it was huge.
So tell us a little bit about that, because that was actually a compilation, a bill that packaged a number of different legislative things that were all sportsmen's priorities as well as some public land-related priorities and brought together quite a diverse coalition of people who supported it. Tell us what that looked like, because we didn't know that much about it at the time we were talking to you last year.
So at least for a decade, we've been working on a comprehensive sportsman's package. And for one reason or another, we came up short. Tried to hitch it on the energy package that died in the end of 2018. Was resurrected in 2019 very quickly by Senator Murkowski, the chairman of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and they kind of did what they call the four corners, which are the two main committees in the House and the two main committees of jurisdiction in the Senate, and they got an agreement out of this thing. And about 8 or 9 of our sportsmen's priorities hitched a ride on that big package, and I think probably in my mind most significantly was the ability to statutorily say that federal public lands are open for access for sportsmen and women for hunting, fishing, recreational shooting, unless there's a reason that they have to be demonstrated why they're closed. And that was BLM land and Forest Service land, and to statutorily make that commitment in a bipartisan Congress signed by the president, I think that's an enormous win for sportsmen and women.
Jeff, why is that important? I mean, it used to be that's a no-brainer. They're open. Why do we need now that legislation to? Is it the fact that times are changing, demographics are changing, there's challenges out there?
Yeah, Steve, I think that's exactly what it came down to. We've seen, some people may have characterized them as insidious. Some of it just may be, just a change of philosophy, but we've definitely seen a change in this idea that we're actually closing things off, and so I think that it's really important to lock it in there so that the future administrations can't arbitrarily do that.
Yeah, we're out in the West. We find a lot of areas on the Forest Service and the BLM that have been closed administratively for some really strange reasons, and BLM's usually been pretty good. They're open unless posted closed, but it was definitely having problems on the forest, and a lot of that impacted things like hunter access, the ability to get in and do projects, different things like that, and so that's really going to help make sure that there's a real legitimate reason to close those areas.
So you're not just saying it, you're not prioritizing hunting. You're basically saying that it's open. If folks want to use it, it's
right.
open.
It's for recreation, mountain bikers, everybody.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. But so it was a bipartisan bill, right? It was
Yeah.
quite a bit of support on both sides.
Yep, it had a huge vote in both the House and the Senate. Another provision that I think is historic in there, the Land and Water Conservation Fund got permanently authorized, along with the LWCF was the Making Public Lands Public provision, which sets aside specific amounts for access only. Easements or fee title purchases to provide greater access for the public for hunting and fishing and outdoor recreational activity. So it's $15 million or 3%, so it's significant.
And it's important because what a lot of people, and this is something I worked on with you years ago when I used to work for Congressional Sportsmans Foundation a long time ago. But the idea, so the Land and Water Conservation Fund generally has been used for large purchases,
correct,
big acreage, and they rank projects out based on lots of times the size and the habitat implications. But access can get squeezed by a narrow window where there's public land or that's being blocked by private land.
Right.
There are opportunities to acquire easements or purchase land that would allow access to those acreage behind.
Right.
But they weren't ranking well in the LWCF process because they didn't have as much habitat value or things like that, but access value was pretty high. So that's what this money is intended to do, is to provide funding to allow those easements or that acquisition that'll allow access to the lands that are behind that private land in a voluntary basis to get.
That's the key. It's a voluntary basis. This is not a government take.
Right.
But yes, that's exactly right.
So we still have to get an annual appropriation for that?
Right now for LWCF, that's correct. Legislation is pending now to try to permanently, not only it's authorized, but to permanently peg a number to it and make that, take it away from the subject to appropriations.
Which makes it even more nonpartisan, which conservation should be.
So. Correct.
And this is funding that's coming in from offshore oil and gas development.
Correct.
So this is money that's supposed to be coming in and used for this purpose. But it hasn't been. It has to be appropriated by Congress,
correct.
And so the intention is to try to get the $900 million that's supposed to go to that fund to actually go to that fund every year.
Yeah.
So what else was in the bill of importance? Maybe a couple more highlights.
Weird that a year goes by. I should know this on the top of my head, but I'm now starting to think about all the stuff we got in the pipeline right now, and.
All right. Well, what's in the pipeline then?
So the ACE Act right now that passed out.
That's the American Conservation Enhancement Act.
Right, and in that was moving, reauthorizing the North American Wetlands Conservation Act up to $60 million, which would be for modern times a historic high. Money for the Chesapeake Bay area,
Great Lakes,
the Great Lakes, authorizing the National Fish Habitat Plan. And then permanently protecting lead fishing tackle from regulation under the Toxic Substance Control Act, TSCA, which it has no business.
But there was also authorization for chronic wasting disease task force, and there was also funding for depredation
for livestock depredation
from protected species, from
wolves
and
grizzly bears. So it was, and that one came out of the Senate on a voice vote. Within 1 week of coming back from the Christmas break, it passed the Senate on a voice vote.
And so let me explain what a voice vote is. That means that they're not doing A's and A's because everybody saying,
agrees.
Yep, we're passing this bill.
It's like acclamation or
absolutely.
Exactly. It's virtually everybody in the Senate saying, yeah, we're for this. Yeah. So
it's a no-brainer. Let's move on.
Exactly.
Let's get it done.
So it's back in the House now because they used a House vehicle and attached the ACE Act to that. Sent it back to the House. We're working with the leaders of the committee and the Democrat leadership in the House to try to accept the Senate. Otherwise, it ping-pongs back and forth, and we're told that if it ping-pongs with changes back to the Senate, especially as you mentioned in an offline conversation, just with the fact that the impeachment stuff's going on, nothing's happening in the Senate right now. So you lose a whole month probably in the Senate right now. So we are trying to encourage them to accept the package as it is in the House, send it to the president, and all these things become law as well.
Is this something that hunters can help do? Can they call their members of the U.S. House of Representatives and call their congressman and say, we want the ACE Act passed?
Yeah. You could do that. I would think it's probably even more important at this point. This is ultimately going to come down to a decision that Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader Steny Hoyer are got to make. It's a political call on this thing, so that would be a target area if you're not afraid to write the Speaker of the House, which I don't know why anybody wouldn't be, So,
or call your congressman and ask them to pressure the leadership in the House. That's another way to do it, to tap into your own, your elected officials.
Yep, you bet.
Well, we say this, conservation is nonpartisan. Here's a really good example. Regardless of which party's pushing this and which party's in power, this needs to happen.
Right.
It's got support of the elected officials now. The president has indicated he'd sign the bill. If it doesn't happen very quickly, we're going to get caught up in election year political cycle, which may mean we have to start over after the election.
Right, and then depending on how the election goes, it's a crapshoot, And so right now we've got the opportunity to take this win. We just need to convince the Democratic leadership in the House that this is okay to accept the Senate package, and really it's breaking down on like one or two minor provisions, which is just a little astounding to me that all that good bipartisan, again, a unanimous vote or no vote, so a unanimous just consent by the Senate on a bipartisan basis, and why it would be potentially derailed is just, that's a little worrisome.
Yeah. Are there any other pieces of legislation that are either on the horizon or something that you're watching?
Yeah, we worked hard. I think we talked about it last year, is the Recovering America's Wildlife Act.
Okay.
Got a lot of good traction on that in the House. It's got 180 co-sponsors right now, passed out of the House Natural Resources Committee on a strong bipartisan vote. So we are working to try to get the commitment again out of the leadership and Democrat leadership in the House to give it some floor time, and we're working in the Senate to try to get a counterpart.
Remind us, we did talk about it, but what would that do?
So Recovering America's Wildlife Act was an idea to take, the funding has changed a little bit, but basically it's an attempt to try to get funding through the state wildlife agencies to get out in front of species of greatest conservation need. There's nearly 12,000 candidate species that could be potentially listed under the Endangered Species Act, and this is an effort to be proactive, get money out in front, use the state agencies to try to do the right things. It's using the PittmanRobertson account, so it's oversimplifying it, but PittmanRobertson worked for game species. Let's do this for non-game species, and that's what this is. So it's complementary to PittmanRobertson by plussing up the PittmanRobertson.
Right. So what's relevant is that hunters and anglers pay into the PittmanRobertson and Dingell Johnson funds through excise taxes, simplified version of that.
Right.
That has been gone for 50, 75 years, depending on which account you're talking about, to help state fish and wildlife agencies manage fish and wildlife species. They are having to deal with a lot more than just hunted and fish species, and they're using that funding. They direct most of it towards that, but they're trying to cobble together the funding they need for some of these species that may be on the edge or might be having more challenges with their populations or seeing population declines. Having funding for this will allow the PittmanRobertson dollars to get back to where they're supposed to go. It will increase the overall agency efficiency and ability to work on a broad range of species. So it's kind of a win for sportsmen as well, that they'll be able to see their money going back and really working on game and fish and wildlife species, right?
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I like about it is it's not telling what the states what they should do.
Right.
The states have identified their priorities through their state wildlife action plans.
That's right.
And so they get to choose then where they apply that money in a simplified version, which could include game species.
Exactly, and there are a number of state wildlife action plans that have identified mule deer actually as a species in need.
Most of the ones have mule deer because of the long-term issues with habitat and the long-term downward trends we've been seeing, plus the economic driver that mule deer provides from a user pay standpoint going each year. So this will give us a little bit more opportunity if the state so chooses to help manage that species and keep it, turn the trend around, stabilize populations, but really take care of what the state's already decided through their processes are important.
Yeah. So another thing that you guys are both members of the Hunting and Shooting Sports Conservation Council. We talked about that last time. And I know that in your fall meeting, or the one right before the holidays, you talked about migration corridors there, right? Amongst other things, but that was a topic. So tell us a little bit about what you're working on with that and what you heard from Secretary Perdue and Secretary Bernhardt about that.
Jeff gave me the challenge of being head of the Wildlife Conservation Committee, subcommittee, and under that committee.
That's because you elected me chair along with the rest of the guys,
true.
Miles.
That's true. So, and we have also some subgroup works on that, but we've made some recommendations to the secretaries about, continuing and maybe even broadening a little bit the migration corridor secretarial order. But I can tell you what, they have. Secretary Barnhart and is just been so supportive there, and we've been able to accomplish a lot of work. The big grant we've got in Wyoming, the NIFWIF grants, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grants, has really helped. And so we made some, and we also, Secretary Perdue said, tell us how we can help on the Forest Service side, on the ag side. And so our committee will be bringing some recommendations up to the council to talk about what we can do on Department of Ag lands. And the other thing, the other big topic that came out of our committee was CWD, and they've asked us to provide them some additional recommendations. Secretary Barnhart has put together a task force that's been also identified in one of the bills, and so, but a lot of the work for CWD is in Department of Agriculture, and again, Secretary Perdue just said, send me some things that we can do, that we can help, and so our subcommittee on CWD is putting that together. So we have, I think, really have come up with some great information, great requests through these committees, through the council, and a lot of them are being implemented. A couple things we didn't get answers to, so we're going back a second time, but we're not going to give up.
So, Miles, I've asked this to a lot of folks that have served on advisory committees. How well is it functioning, and are the secretaries listening to what you guys recommend?
I mean, at first, I think, we got a lot of secretarial orders, and there was a lot of things that the agencies weren't implementing. And so through the council, we asked those to be raised as a higher priority. And, I'll give an example. The categorical exclusion for sage grouse and mule deer, that's, close to my heart.
Something we've talked about a number of times on this podcast.
Times, yeah. But it kind of got drug in the bureaucracy of the organization and stuff, and we've highlighted that. And the last meeting, I brought that up, and Secretary Barnhart says, I'm on it, and pointed right at me and said, and it is moving. It's slow, but it's moving. It's getting through the process. So they are listening and doing what they can. But some of this is just bogged down in bureaucracy.
Yeah, but Miles, and Steve, I would just, to give some credit there, both Secretary Perdue and Secretary Bernhardt have personally made it a priority of theirs to personally attend at least part of these meetings. And oftentimes we've had both of them. And they're directing senior level folks there to sit in and listen, and we've got good rapport with them and a good relationship, and as Miles said, if we're not satisfied with the answer round one, we're pushing it back again and saying, this is a bureaucratic, and I'm not taking shots at the bureaucrats, but sometimes when they see us trying to suggest the way of doing things has got to change, everybody's natural reaction is, well, been doing it my way, and you just got to kind of be forceful, but in a positive way. And I think that's what we're trying to do. And I feel like we've made a tremendous amount, not just because I'm the chairman of it, but because I just feel like we've been very active. We've been busy. The committee chairs, we've got 4 different committees under the council right now. They're all meeting and able to bring stuff, so we really make the most use of our time when we're sitting in the meetings.
The reason I ask that question is not to disparage this administration over any other ones, or prop them up unnecessarily. The reason I ask is a lot of folks don't know who our voices are in a political or bureaucratic process. The council is an official advisory voice to 2 secretaries, 2 cabinet secretaries.
Right.
So it's important for folks to understand that their involvement through the organizations, up through the people that are put on those councils, who it's a very highly competitive thing, that they can be assured that the sportsman's voice, the conservation needs of our species is actually getting to the highest level, and it's being taken seriously. Now, we understand how agencies work. Sometimes bureaucracy slows us down. Sometimes things aren't as important as we want to make them seem, but at least folks can be assured that you two, to particularly Jeff as chair, that you're doing the best job you can to make sure that those needs and concerns of the people that you represent are being expressed to the right people. And at this case, it's the highest level of our government, those people that run multiple agencies and sit around the cabinet table with the president. And I think that cannot be understated. And a lot of folks may not know the importance of an advisory group like the Hunting and Shooting Sports Conservation Council. So that's the reason I bring that up. You know, Jody, I'm looking at you because you sort of rolled my eyes when I bring it up.
No, I didn't.
Maybe it's
that's it. End of day. I'm starting to get tired.
Yeah.
Maybe you're putting me to sleep, Steve. Maybe that's
that
it.
could happen.
But Steve, I think you're exactly right. I think that when you get two cabinet secretaries that are personally
Absolutely.
vested enough to want to come to the meetings, to listen to it, you know, I don't know what we could, as a community at large of hunters and anglers and outdoors people, that we could hope for than to have that ability to talk to them look right at them. As Miles said, you know, I was sitting there and Secretary Bernard said, "I'm on it," pointed his finger right at Miles, knew that Miles was carrying that message on behalf of not only the Mule Deer Foundation folks, but on you know, anybody that cares about the Western landscape, you know.
Well, and I, you know, what a lot of people don't understand too is sometimes these agencies are so large and have such a diverse mission that, you know, a lot of times in the past, hunting and fishing wasn't a high priority. These two secretaries are hunters, and they've elevated this, and it's important. And like I say, to get them at the cab both there and to stay and to be engaged and answer questions, and then to see them become more and more educated on the issues every time you hear them speak, because we keep bringing them up to them and saying these are important to us, and they're out there saying them in their speeches.
Well, and from those of us that don't work at that level, the nice thing is when we go in to deal with issues with their staff or agency folks, we're no longer trying to educate them up to speed. We're talking about solutions. We're talking about addressing issues. We don't have to explain the difference between a mule deer and a white-tailed deer.
Right.
They know what that is. They know what the issues are, so we can spend that precious time working on the things we should be working on, which are solutions to these challenges that are in front of us.
Yep. And again, we're getting very specific on recommendations. You know, I kind of think one of my thoughts on it was make sure that it's relevant, that it matters to the sportsmen and women of America, and it's within the purview of something that the secretaries can change.
Right.
You know, and otherwise we're wasting our time. We're talking, you know, how are we going to change recruitment for hunting and fishing, getting more kids outside? Well, they don't have any more ability. They do, but I mean, you know, we're talking about specific stuff that they know that it falls under their purview, and let's go after those specific things. So we're very, you know, it's detailed. I'm very pleased, I think, collectively with the work that the council's been doing.
That's awesome. So there's another group that you both are involved in. It's called the American Wildlife Conservation Partners, and I don't want to say group because it's more of a network, a collaboration of all of the sportsmen's organizations. So Mule Deer Foundation, Congressional, Sportsman Foundation, Turkey Federation, Elk Foundation,
That's nearly 50,
Rough Grouse
50
Society.
groups,
There's fishing groups. So tell us a little bit about what that is, and because I know you guys are also working now with a presidential election coming up, that there's going to be some recommendations that you want to make that continue to carry forward. So tell us a little bit about what AWCP is doing and what you can expect to see from that moving forward here in the next couple of months.
Well, one of the things that we do, that a product we put together, is it's called Wildlife for the 21st Century. And every 4 years, whether it's a new president, a new administration, or one being reelected, we present these list of priorities that are important to us in the conservation, wildlife conservation community, and then we put that in a form, and we used to give it to the president after they were elected and their staffs were in place. We now give it to both campaigns when the candidates, both parties decide on who their candidate is. And in this case, we still have an incumbent that's running, so we'll give it to them, but they pretty much already know. But we generally give that to them so that they can build their platforms. They can put that into their platforms, and as they go forward, and even when they're on the campaign trail, they'll have those issues that they can look at and say, oh, these are important to the people in this area, and it's really used a lot. In fact, it was really neat to see Secretary Barnhart in the White House giving a speech, and when he opened his folder, the W21 booklet from the previous one we'd written was in his folder. So it gets used. It's effective, and you've got all these 50 organizations signing on to this, so they know it's coming from a broad coalition of people. So that's one. So
we're writing version 6 right now.
Right.
Getting it ready for the candidates.
Right.
Yep.
What are the topics? What are just a couple of the topics that are included in there?
I mean, the typical ones. CWD's big. Continue working on public access.
Corridors.
Energy
development's always
private
in there.
lands conservation.
Right.
Private lands conservation, farm bill, all those issues.
So you guys, you go through the issue. You boil down what the topic is, then you make a couple of recommendations per topic that we've all agreed on.
Right.
And then that's given to the people in position of power and
for the candidates,
making. And we hope to see, regardless of who wins, that stuff being implemented or at least being addressed.
And then if you overlay the work of the federal advisory councils, you'll see that there's obviously an interlocking of those same recommendations, and so I think it's a way for the entire community to feel like they've got, because there's only X number of us that are on the council representing X number of groups, and this way I think it kind of brings everybody in, because the W21 recommendations roll up into the council recommendations, so it kind of, again, it just reinforces that it's a lot bigger than the small group of us that sit on that council that are appointed by the secretaries. So.
Yeah, we'll definitely be bringing those priorities up if the council continues. We'll continue to bring those priorities forward.
Well, I think it's in a world where it seems like hair color divides us. It's really encouraging to see these groups coming together on issues, agreeing on a set of recommendations by issue, and then all handing this and saying, this is what our community thinks are the top priorities. Please make it your own.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Well said. It's exactly what it is.
Well, it's neat to see, and I think it's really important for Mule Deer Foundation members and other people who are interested in conservation to know that this kind of dialogue is going on across a variety of conservation organizations, and effectively working those messages into elected officials, whether that's in the administration or in Congress or even in state capitals through legislatures as well. So moving forward in election year, what are some of the things that you guys see coming down over the next few months? What can members do to get involved or be aware, or how can they follow up and stay on top of these issues?
So, first of all, always reach out to your elected officials if you're looking for talking points or information. I know the Mule Deer Foundation has got information. The Congressional Sportsmans Foundation has information. You can go onto our website, www.congressionalsportsman.org. Click on your state. You can see what's going on there. It'll have how to contact your members in the U.S. delegation or your state legislative folks, and you can't stress enough, be engaged. Don't be intimidated by the process. Be engaged. Politics is local. The people that are going to need your vote in November of this year are the same people that you've got some leverage right now.
Absolutely.
So reach out and
reach
let
out.
them know what's
be
going
courteous.
on.
Be respectful.
Oh, yeah.
Explain how it affects you at home,
Right.
right? That's the important thing. They're elected to represent you and your state. we don't, and I mean, in any conversation, we don't gain anything by yelling one side or another, but presenting your case and the information.
You're just not yelling loud enough.
No, I don't live in your house. You yell. No, no, but,
I do that.
Well, that's because you're hard of hearing. Yeah. So, but anyway, be respectful, but have that conversation and tell why that issue is important to you in your state, in their district, and bring it back to home because they need to hear from that. Or if they're not going to hear from you, you're going to hear from the other side, and that may sway them in a different direction.
And it also, sorry, Miles, it may sound a little cliche to say this also, but it's important to find out, and I'm not talking Republican, Democrat, I don't care what party, but it's important to know where your potential candidates or your elected officials stand on your issues, and it's totally okay to reach out and ask them about that. And if you don't like their answers, it's up to you to decide. But, engage in the political process. I can tell you from working inside the Beltway every day, if you send us good, solid pro sportsmen, men and women in elected positions, it makes the job a lot easier. As Miles said earlier, both Secretary Perdue and Secretary Bernhardt are both sportsmen, and we're talking the same language. So I'd love to see a full Congress full of people that hunt and fish.
At one time, it probably was.
100% it was. I don't know now, but it's still, the more we can get in there, the easier the job becomes. So get out, figure out what your candidates stand for, vote, get out and vote, do your civic responsibility, and send us people we can work with. So
if you had one wish for this year, if you could pick one bill that you wanted passed, and see, what would it be, Jeff?
I would say for the long-term impact of it would probably be the RAWA, Recovering America's Wildlife Act. I just think that is a Pittman-Robertson-esque Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act kind of long-term ability to try to head off, critical habitat loss and these potential listing of species.
How much is that a year?
$1.4 billion a year, and it's even in Washington. It sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. But you think about just one listed species. You think about what the Fish and Wildlife Service is spending now on, and a lot of it on defending litigation and things like that. This is trying to get proactive, get ahead, let the states, as you said, Steve, turn this into something where the states, which is exactly where wildlife management needs to be. So,
Miles, what would you get if you had one wish?
Me? I would like to see two things, actually. I'm going to tell you two. I want to see funding in the highway bill for wildlife transportation crossings and more funding for research and monitoring for CWD. Yeah. Those are my two priorities.
Those are mine too. If I could amend mine, I got too many of them.
You asked
for one.
And Miles cheated and did too.
Well, we give him a little latitude.
Okay.
He's the boss.
Yeah.
So one of the things we want to make sure our listeners understand is their needs, their concerns, their voice is strong right now with you two and many others, to elected officials and to agency department heads, that when someone says, well, they don't know what we want back there, we can actually say, yeah, I think they do know what we want. They may not be able to give it to us for a lot of other reasons, but at least we know that your voice, the message you carry, is getting through to the right people. And I want to thank you both for that. You're both got a lot of work ahead of you. You have congratulations on all the work that the successes you've done to date. I don't think it would have happened without the dedicated time you've spent and the leadership you've shown. So again, it's something that most people won't know, but we're trying to highlight this. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all you do. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to visit with us and tell us what's going on and help our listeners to get more involved.
You bet.
Thanks again.
Enjoyed it.
Until next time, this is Jody Stemler.
And I'm Steve Belinda, and thank you for talking mule deer.
Thanks for talking mule deer with Steve Belinda and Jody Stemler. The Mule Deer Foundation is the only conservation group in North America dedicated to restoring, improving, and protecting mule deer and black-tailed deer and their habitat. MDF is a strong voice for hunters in access, wildlife management, and conservation policy issues. To find out more, visit www.muledeer.org and stay tuned for the next episode of Talkin' Mule Deer.